As regards myself, my name is Andrew. My specialty is in Islamic theology. I speak Arabic. I study classical Arabic as well as modern Arabic, specifically within Islam. And what I'd like to talk about tonight is the situation with Islam and the West. What it is, where it's going, where it came from, and what we can do about it. Now, I should begin by saying that historically speaking, the situation with Islam, the West, and the implications that it has for our future is nothing new. And what we are seeing is the continual unfolding of a long and persistent problem which cannot be solved by political, economic, educational, or intellectual means. What we are seeing in our own times is the manifestation and fruition of orthodox Islamic theological teachings being applied within the West. Now, these teachings come from the innermost being of Islam, and they can never be changed because they are the fundamental presumptions believed in faith upon which the Islamic religion is founded. And what is different is that for the first time in Western history, the conflicts, the problems, and the other issues which stemmed from these theological dogmae have moved from the Islamic world into the Western world primarily through the immigration of people from Muslim countries coming to the West. To this, I'd like to add a little bit, and that is the role of theology in the relationship between Islam and the West. Now, as with all religions, they are founded upon unchanging presumptions, which we call faith. These presumptions form the foundation of religion because it is out of them that man derives the answers to the questions of his existence and meaning in the world. And this in turn affects how we perceive society, culture, and the way we relate to our fellow man. In the case of the West, we collectively trace our heritage to the Greek and Roman civilizations. A Greco-Roman society sustained a love for inquiry, excellence, and the pursuit of knowledge, as well as a sense of order for human social life. However, despite their accomplishments, neither Rome nor Greece had reached a definitive, lasting answer to the questions surrounding human existence and purpose. And this is the great accomplishment of Christianity and Judaism, because it was through these religions that the West's already tremendous achievements culturally and historically were instilled with a greater meaning and purpose outside of ends into themselves. Briefly said, Christianity and Judaism taught three simple points that caused such a great influence. There is a God, this God is love, and that man was created in the image and glory of this God. And the result of this was tremendous, because from this we in the West came to assert as truth, and definitively speaking, that the world and universe was created as a place of law and order, which founded our understanding of science, inquiry, rationale, and absolute truth. We accepted the idea that all men reflect their Creator and are loved by Him, and it was from this that we derived ideas of dignity, mercy, human rights, freedom, and liberty. It has affected all areas of our society, our understanding of ourselves, government, the judicial system, our legislative process, social relations, and even the language and idioms which we use when we speak. In short, what Christianity and Judaism brought to the West was an understanding that man's existence was something good, directed to a greater purpose outside of himself, and would lead to man's transformation and that of society. Now, Orthodox Islamic theology, in contrast, teaches that yes, there is a supreme deity. However, this supreme deity, in the words of the Quran, يَفْعَلْ مَا يُشَاءُ, he does as he wills for the sake of divine will. Regarding man, man is a slave whose purpose is to obey the will of Allah, whatever that may be. And it's best expressed in the Quranic verse, خَلَقَنَاهُ الْإِنسَانِ فِي أَحْسَنِ التَّقْوِيمِ فَرَدَدْنَاهُ إِلَى أَفْصَلِ السَّافِلِينَ إِلَّا لِلَّذِينَ عَمِلُوا وَعَمَلُوا الصَّالِحَاتِ فَلَهُمْ أَجْرَاءُ غَيْرُ مَمْنُونَ. Verily, we have created man in the best of molds. Then do we abase him, we bring him down to the lowest of the low, except for those who believe and do righteous deeds, referring to Muslims and Islam, as many of the classical Quranic commentators will mention. For they shall have a reward unfailing. Now, the theological results of this understanding in Islam are as important as those in the West as it applied to Christianity and Judaism, because Allah can only be understood through the perspective of His absolute will. He does what He wills because He wills it for the sake of divine will itself. His actions can have no purpose should He will other than for the sake that He willed them to be such. And man is a mere creation whose existence is because Allah wills, and Allah raises up or belittles him for no reason other than will. Reason order, purpose, and the very existence of man are as long as Allah wills that they are, unless He chooses to change them. Then they are something else. And this is really expressed excellently in a common Muslim prayer supplication. Sometimes you'll find it in Muslim textbooks. Sometimes you'll hear it when Muslim speakers speak. Allah guides whomever He guides, and whoever Allah guides will never be misguided because Allah has guided him. And whoever Allah misguides will never be guided because Allah has misguided him. Therefore, when we think of science, rationale, reasoning, and intellectual inquiry as we understand them in the West, it is not seen this way in Islam. Reason exists solely to promote the already understood theological presumptions without asking questions. Never at any point in Muhammad's life did he say, "Ask and you shall receive, seek and you shall find, or knock and the door shall be open to you." But he did say, "Whoever criticizes Allah or His Prophet," referring to Muhammad, "incurs the curse of Allah." And you will find this consistently throughout the Quran as well as the Hadith, albeit phrased in a different phrasing. As for the meaning of life, Orthodox Islamic theology teaches that life's purpose is the propagation of Islam, so that one day, as Allah willed according to Islamic belief, all men will submit to Islam and the commands of Muhammad. There is no such thing as love in Islam. There is only Islam, which is submission. And now the result of this is love in Islam. There's no concept of love as we understand it. It's only submission. The basic difference is that those are attributes that describe Allah. However, Allah's nature is never known outside of absolute will. I do what I can because I can, for the sake that I can, without reason or purpose. And the result of this is obvious, because the Muslim world, even during its golden age, which historians classify as being between the 8th and 12th centuries, was never able to rival in a worldly sense the splendor of the Greek, Roman, Persian, or Syriac past. And following the destruction of the Muslim world by the Mongol sacking of Baghdad in 1256 AD, it has never recovered. In addition, prior to this, since the earliest days of Islam, the Muslim world has been perpetually consumed by war, mostly between fellow Muslims of different sects, usually Sunnis and Shias, whom, because of their religious differences, regard each other as mutual apostates and therefore without human dignity. It is true that there have been individual intellectual stars of Islamic society. However, when we look at these people, they are few in comparison to the numbers which the West has produced, and while they have done great things, they are pale in comparison to the accomplishments which the West has made. To this, it's important to understand that the West and Islam are intrinsically different from each other. As oil separates from water, the two can never be mixed together. In the same way, the West and Islam are two completely separate societies that can never be mixed into each other, and vice versa. And the difference is, once again, it stems from theology. The Judeo-Christian theology, which formed part of the cultural and social identity of the West, as opposed to Islamic theology, which respectively formed the religious identity of many Muslim nations. Judeo-Christian theology, it gave us something that taught us hope, encouragement, purpose, order, and most importantly, a love of fellow man, because God is love, man was created in love, and it was in love that man would return to God upon death. On the contrary, Orthodox Islamic theology restructured the barbarism of Arabia and codified it into a system under Muhammad, so that it changed from being an isolated geographic phenomenon to be reflected forever as divinely revealed truth in Orthodox Islamic theology. Now, into this is the great hope of Islam, that one day peace will come when the entire world is converted to Islam. In Arabic, it would be to be made to submit to Islam. And with this would come the elimination of all non-Muslim religions and thought which does not accord with Islamic teaching. Now, for this reason, obviously you can see why there have been so many conflicts between the Western world and Islam, especially militarily. Because the West and Islam have met, as you all well know, many times on history's battlefield. And every time, the West has been able to repel the advances of Islamic armies. The first of this was in 732 AD, when Charles Martel, at the request of the Pope, faced Caliph Abdurrahman at Poitiers, France, in what some people have called the battle that saved Western civilization. In 1387, the priest and Saint John St. John Capistrano, when he was 73 years old, went to the city of Belgrade with a small force and successfully fought off the entire Turkish army, once again preventing the Islamization of the Balkans as well as Eastern and Central Europe. And finally, at the urging of the Pope in 1683 AD, on September 11th, Polish King Jan Sobieski conclusively defeated Islam's armies and pushed them back into the Balkans, which spelled the decline of the Ottomans as well as much of medieval Islamic civilization. If it were not for a Western military victory in each of these circumstances, it is almost inevitable that the West would have been Islamized today. In addition to this, there have been many other smaller and equally significant events that gradually over the centuries preserved the West from destruction, culturally and religiously. Today, however, Europe and America are in a situation with Islam unlike any other in history. There has been no major conflict between the West and Islam since 1683 AD with the Ottoman expulsion from Poland. Significant social changes, however, beginning at the turn of the 20th century in Western society, have caused significant declines in the support structures which have prevented or stopped Islamization in the West. Some of these are more applicable to Europe, but they also are happening within America, so I feel it's relevant to speak about both. The first of these is there have been population declines, and with this has come a decline in family structure, increased divorce rates, low birth rates, and abortion that has been supplemented by massive immigration from Muslim countries. Second, there has been a steep decline in religious practice and observance, joined with a growing social hostility towards religion from non-Muslim Westerners. And finally, there have been cultural, intellectual, and moral declines that have resulted in several generations of Western people being brought up without a sense of societal identity, a love for intellectual discovery, or even self-respect. On the other hand, if we look at Islam, Islam has seen a resurgence in religious revivalism and practice globally. Many Muslims today have large families. They're generally more stable in their husband-wife relationships. They encourage marriage. And when pregnancy happens, intended or not, they have a child and they raise it as a Muslim. Muslims teach their children a sense of cultural identity, encourage them to study the hard sciences, and promote the building up of themselves and their own Muslim communities. And religiously speaking, Muslims are generally stronger in their faith and devotion to it, and they are definitely unafraid to practice it in public. Now, this situation that we see in the Islamic world is happening across the world. However, it would be less of a concern if it were limited to Muslim nations alone. On the contrary, the West has been significantly affected by this once again because of massive immigration and the establishment of Muslim communities in the West that started in the 1940s after World War II and coupled with the social declines I mentioned earlier, taking place already within the West. The result is that Islam has been able to spread pervasively through Western society and primarily through two means. The first of these is conversion. Namely, that people who are born in the West of non-Muslim extraction are searching for meaning and stability in their lives, and they are either unwilling to discover their Western heritage, or they're ignorant of their Western heritage, and they turn to Islam to provide a persistent, plausible, and meaningful answer to life's questions and a structure in religion and culture. The next case is primarily with Muslim men in the West who seek to marry non-Muslim women, and upon marrying one, insist that at the very least the children are born and raised as Muslims. And if not, it may also include having the spouse herself convert to Islam. And this, I add, is a great danger, because the spread of Islam through conversion and intermarriage is the greatest long-term threat the West faces, because it is through these two venues that it is able to institutionalize itself within society. People often note, I should add, and very correctly so, that Islam has historically spread by the sword, as some people like to use the term, meaning through military conquest and jihad. And this is very true. However, from the perspective of Orthodox Islamic theology, as well as Islamic history, jihad is merely a means to achieving a greater end, and that is the conversion of the entire world to Islam. And to this, I'd like to offer you an Islamic perspective. What is a more efficient means of propagating Islam, especially within the case of the West? Jihad, or gradual conversion through evangelization and intermarriage with Western women? Well, the answer is clear. Conversion and intermarriage, because they are simple and easily performed means to accomplish the same ends which jihad intends for. Both means have worked well, and their effects are lasting, because if a person converts to Islam or marries into a Muslim family and raises their children as Muslims, those people will assume positions in society and continue through them to spread Islam. It's even more perilous because this kind of approach cannot be stopped because it's a matter of personal choice. Nobody's being forced to convert to Islam, mind you, but rather Islam is being presented to them, and these people are making a personal decision out of their own free will and choice to accept it and believe it. Because of this situation that we face, there are no short-term solutions. There are short-term means that we can take. There are short-term means that we can take, but there are no short-term solutions. The situation that we see developed over the course of a century, and most likely, if we want to speak in realistic terms, it's going to take at least a century or more for it to be resolved. I emphasize, though, that the solution most likely will not come from government or politicians, but it will come as Islam spread itself through individual people working in society. It will come from the West, from individual religious leaders, cultural leaders, and members who will look to confront it in the same way that Islam approached us. And to that, I want to suggest 3 points that we can look at in forming a holistic response toward this. The first step begins with ourselves. The West must rediscover its religious, historical, and cultural identities that we have given up in the name of misguided compassion for people who do not share our identity or the compassion that we have striven to give them. We cannot confront Islam unless we know who we are, because if we do, we will only be able to establish our position in defensive terms. That is, we will be able to criticize Islam, but we cannot offer a replacement to that which Islam is putting out to us. And this is what has been happening in the West for a long time. However, the West must cease to think in defensive terminology, although we must remain on the defensive, and once we rediscover our identity, assert itself to the Muslim world as the best option for society and mankind. What I'm speaking about is a gradual discovery through conversion of our society to discover our religious identity, our cultural identity, and the place that we want to have in the world. The second step is likewise a conversion. However, this one involves the conversion of Muslims. And by that, I mean that as Islam has taken up a small residence in Western society, especially now that Muslims are being born on Western soil as first generation and second generation by birth Americans and Europeans, their religious identity is with Islam, but their land of birth is the West. And given this situation and the incompatibility of Orthodox Islamic theology with the religious and cultural heritage of the West, we cannot presume that those who follow Orthodox Islam will be able to be assimilated into the West in the same way that other immigrant groups have been in the past. However, assimilation is necessary because society cannot be at perpetual animosity with its own members. This is best expressed in the saying, "A house divided against itself cannot stand." Because of this situation with Orthodox Islamic theology, one of the only ways that we can achieve assimilation is through people choosing to leave Islam of their own volition for something else. And historically speaking, this is very difficult to achieve. However, it is most commonly achieved, and the Muslim world is very well aware of this, especially in sub-Saharan Africa, where there have been many conversions from Islam to various forms of Christianity, and it is completely reversing historically Muslim societies, turning them into non-Muslim societies, is simply put Christianization. Christianity has the most successful track record of doing this because, like Islam, it has an evangelical approach. It provides a concrete and consistent answer to life's questions, which many people have, and at the same time, it shares certain religious similarities with Islam. The final step that I propose is the family, and this applies equally to men and women, because men and women must rediscover the beauty that is marriage and children, that the family is the nucleus of society, and children are the spine which gives structure, stability, and prosperity to society's future. It's clear that no society can survive without children. If there are more people than there are jobs, the people will go to other parts of society and the world, and with that they will in turn influence wherever they go. If there are too few people to fill the needs of society, then people from other countries must be imported in, and as a result, those people who come will influence us, and they will change our culture. And the latter has been happening in the West for more than a century, and it is shown most vividly in Europe. during the 20th century, many Europeans, for various reasons, stopped having families at a sustainable rate. And in addition, many of them had a high abortion rate. And as a result, the population declined. So in order to fill many of the jobs and positions in society that were now not being taken up, they had to import people to take their place. And where did they look to? The Muslim world. And this process has been continuing to today. And I know I'm not the only one to mention this, but it is very possible that if this situation continues, Europeans could possibly under-reproduce and abort themselves out of existence, while Muslims will reproduce themselves into the places where Europeans once resided. So these 3 points, the conversion of the West, the conversion of the Muslims, and the promotion of the family, will cause a gradual, long-lasting change in Western society that will last for generations. But into this, I want to add that we must take many smaller measures, both assertive and protective, within the West. To this, we must continue to use our resources to identify and prevent terrorism. We must push for legal immigration and the enforcement of our immigration laws within our societies. We must continue to oppose hate speech legislation, manipulative lawsuits, and the overturning of our legal and social structures in the name of tolerance or coexistence. Additionally, we must respond to these and the many other smaller situations that we will encounter in the context of these long-term goals. The West has a long challenge ahead of itself, and the consequences of the decisions we make today will affect us for generations unknown. We in the West have something special, though, the Muslim world does not have. We have a religious and a cultural heritage that raised us up from the ashes of the fallen Roman Empire into a great civilization. Therefore, it's in our best interest. It's in the best interest of the Muslims who are living in the West, and it's the best interest of Muslims and people around the world that we rediscover our religious and cultural identity that made the West the envy of the world. And through discovering that and re-accepting the wonder of who we are, where we came from, why we exist, and where we are going, can we approach the Muslim world and the people living in the West with what we have and bring them into our society, as well as preserve our own heritage for generations to come. And to this I want to say thank you very much for listening to me. I appreciate it.
You want to handle the questions, or should I call?
We'll do the pass the microphone.
No, but, yeah.